Imagine the universe didn't begin with an explosion, but with a single circular stroke. One circle, then two, then seven, and suddenly a whole grid of life appears, as if it had already been there from the beginning. So, what is the flower of life? An ancient decorative motif, or the secret blueprint of nature, or simply the way the human mind finds meaning in repetition? Here is the central question today. If the flower of life truly is the blueprint of life, then what exactly is it describing? The structure of matter, the structure of consciousness, or just a symbol so beautiful that we want to believe it has power? People call it the flower of life, but it does not look like a flower with soft petals and a golden core. It is a network of equal circles, overlapping in a precise order. If you look long enough, it feels both simple and unsettling, because that simplicity creates the sensation that you are staring at a law of the universe. Have you ever watched soap bubbles touch? When many bubbles gather, they naturally form optimal curves to divide space. No one commands them, and yet order emerges. The flower of life gives that exact same impression. The strange thing is this: you can draw the flower of life with only a compass. No complex measuring tools required. Just one center, one radius, and steady rotation. And if you keep turning long enough, intersections begin to generate other shapes. Hexagons, equilateral triangles, six-pointed stars, child shapes hidden within the mother shape. That is why people get pulled into the next question, a pattern that generates many other patterns from itself. Is it a language? A shape-generating machine? Or a kind of geometric code? If you cut the flower of life in a certain way, you will see the seed of life. Usually 7 circles, 1 in the center, 6 surrounding it. 7 sounds familiar, doesn't it? 7 days of creation in certain traditions. 7 musical notes, 7 colors of the rainbow, 7 heavens. In ancient stories. But wait, is that a truth of the universe, or simply the human habit of assigning 7 to everything? Because if you look at it with a cold eye, 7 circles are simply the natural result of placing equal circles tightly around a central one. It is the simplest packing method, like stacking oranges into a cluster. You do not need mysticism, only geometry. So why has the flower of life been elevated into a code of life? Why do some claim it contains the order of cells, the proportions of nature, the structure of atoms, even a map of consciousness? Is it because its balance reminds us of life, or is there truly a footprint of it inside nature? Let us begin with what everyone mentions: the carvings of the flower of life in ancient monuments. People say that in Egypt, at the temple of Osiris in Abydos, the flower of life is carved into stone. The photographs circulate widely, but the question remains: when were they carved? By whom? And are they truly ancient in the way we imagine? This is where the story becomes interesting. A pattern appearing in an ancient temple does not automatically make it a lost secret. It could be decoration from a later period. It could be marks left by pilgrims. It could be restoration work, or simply an artisan who liked the pattern. You see? The same carving. One person sees evidence of a lost civilization. Another sees ancient graffiti. Both are telling a story. The difference is which story is told more convincingly. So let us shift perspective. Instead of arguing whether it is ancient, ask another question. Why does a pattern like this appear in so many places? Egypt, Greece, Rome, the Middle East. Even in Islamic art, repeating in symmetrical geometry is common. The simplest explanation: the circle is the most natural decorative tool when you have a compass. Fix a radius and rotate. You create repeating structures that are easy to extend and difficult to ruin. In Tatsensei, it may simply be the operating system of geometric art. No secret required, only technique. Technique. Yet another question appears. If it is merely technique, why does it feel alive? Why does it resemble a honeycomb, a crystal lattice, a snowflake, a molecular structure? Why does it evoke reproduction, duplication, division? Perhaps because life itself loves repetition. DNA is repetition. A heartbeat is repetition. Breath is repetition. Day and night are repetition. Even your habits are repetition. So maybe the flower of life is correct, not because it describes a physical formula, but because it touches our instinct for recognizing order. Humans see order and call it meaning. But the story does not stop there. From the flower of life emerges another shape called the vesica, two overlapping circles forming an almond-shaped center. This shape was used in medieval Christian art to frame sacred figures. It also appears in classical geometry as a unit for constructing equilateral triangles. Here, the tension increases because the vesica piscis does not just look beautiful, it generates proportion. From its intersections, you can construct balanced forms that make people believe nature itself was constructed that way. Yet again, we must ask, does nature truly construct with a compass, or is the compass simply the simplest tool humans use to imitate nature? Within communities of sacred geometry, the flower of life connects to Metatron's cube. Select certain intersection points and connect them with straight lines. Suddenly, you have a network containing multiple Some claim this represents the structure of matter. They connected to the Platonic solids: tetrahedron, cube, octahedron, dodecahedron. This is where things become fascinating, because the Platonic solids are indeed significant in geometry. They are the rare regular solids in three-dimensional space, and historically, philosophers associated them with the elements earth, water, fire, air, and ether. But notice a subtle shift from symbolic philosophy to physical reality. One side used shapes for contemplation. The other claims those shapes are literal atomic structures. These are not the same. A more grounded explanation would be this: the flower of life is a visual map of symmetry, and symmetry does exist in physics. Crystals display symmetry. Certain chemical models show symmetry. So the symbol overlaps with nature at some level, not because it is mystical, but because mathematics describes structure. Sounds reasonable, right? Yet the counter-argument arises immediately. If symmetry explains it, why not countless other symbols? Why is the flower of life crowned king? Why not triangular grids? Why not squares? Why not spirals? In fact, many do choose spirals. They choose the golden ratio, Fibonacci's C-cells, Hurricane's galaxies. Which means we live in a marketplace of symbols. Any pattern can be called a code if the story is compelling enough, but do not laugh too quickly. Even commercialized, the flower of life still exerts a genuine pull. You can stare at it and feel calm, like a mandala, like meditative ornament, like rhythm. Perhaps its power does not lie in being physically correct, but in functioning as a visual breath. You look, you are drawn inward. You sense connection. You feel yourself part of a network. And here, a larger hypothesis opens. Maybe the flower of life is a blueprint, psychologically. Not technically. It does not say the world is built this way. It says you can feel the world this way. If so, why is it labeled ancient and sacred? Perhaps because humans always want to grant their emotions a deeper origin. If a pattern moves you, you want it to be more than decoration. You want it to echo from somewhere older than history. And so, stories attach themselves. Leonardo da Vinci is mentioned, his geometric sketches, his studies of proportion, but jumping from that to claiming he decoded the flower of life is a leap many enjoy making. His name makes things feel legitimate. Pythagoras is mentioned. Everything is number. Geometry is key, and the flower of life is placed into that lineage. But real history is rarely as neat as motivational posters. Recognize the pattern. A beautiful symbol, scattered historical traces, famous names. Enough to create the feeling of transmission. Let us try a thought experiment. If the flower of life truly were a blueprint, what would it draw? Cells, division, expansion. The transformation from one into many. That brings to mind the tree of life in many traditions. A branching structure growing upward. From one into many, but the flower of life does not branch. It spreads outward evenly. It is a network, not a tree. So, if it is a blueprint, It is not linear evolution. It is simultaneous connection, every point touching others, everything overlapping. Notice what matters most, not the circles themselves, but where they intersect. Life is not the isolated self. It is where self meets other, where genes meet environment, where ideas meet their time. The more we reflect, the more it feels like metaphor, a metaphor of interdependence. Yet the question returns, does the metaphor arise from nature or from human society? Mathematically and physically, similar patterns do exist. Triangular grids are efficient packings. Equal circles packed together form hexagonal lattice. Honeycombs are hexagonal because they optimize material and space. So perhaps the flower of life is simply optimal form. And optimal forms appear in nature not because they are sacred, but because nature economizes energy, matter, effort. Then why does optimality feel sacred? Maybe because the brain evolved to prefer predictability. Order reduces fear, and where understanding is possible, sacredness can arise. Another layer remains. The flower of life is worn as amulets, printed on walls, said to increase energy, cleanse space, balance vibrations. Here we must ask carefully, are these measurable claims or subjective experiences? A reasonable explanation is psychological effect. If you believe a symbol protects you, stress decreases, sleep improves. You conclude it has power, yet people report similar sensations: warmth, vibration, peace. Perhaps language shapes experience, shared vocabulary guides perception. Experience reinforces belief. So the flower of life may be soft technology, not physical machinery, but symbolic machinery. It organizes emotion, frames belief, turns inner chaos into visible order. This resembles religion, art, ritual, not necessarily false, not necessarily supernatural, but human ways of living with uncertainty. Why is the circle powerful? No edges, no beginning, no end. It suggests cycles, time cycles, seasons cycle, life and death cycle. The flower of life, layers, cycles upon cycles, personal cycles within communal cycles, cellular cycles within bodily cycles, lifetimes within history. It whispers against loneliness. It whispers that nothing is isolated, that everything overlaps. Yet that whisper can be dangerous. If we believe too strongly in predetermined blueprints, we risk fatalism. We risk ignoring randomness. We risk turning tragedy into cosmic plan. So use it as a mirror, not a verdict. It reflects our desire for order. It does not erase chaos. Imagine an ancient civilization that understood geometry deeply. They observed repeating patterns, built temples by proportion, encoded construction rules into ornament. The flower of life as compressed notation. In that view, it is not a talisman. It is textbook. Those who know geometry extract triangles, hexagons, stars, polyhedra. Those who do not see only decoration. This explanation requires no mysticism, only knowledge. But if it were textbook, why no clear commentary? Why no preserved instruction? Perhaps geometry transcends language, but even geometry requires teaching and context. If it is not textbook, not talisman, not literal blueprint, perhaps it is cultural memory. A pattern repeated because it is easy to recreate, easy to extend, and aesthetically powerful. The easy becomes old. The old becomes sacred. The sacred becomes true. Why does it feel familiar? Pattern recognition. We have seen similar forms in honeycombs, snowflakes, compound eyes, bubbles, flowers, crystals. We have seen it in life, so we call it life. It feels generative because drawing it is generative. One circle becomes many. Expansion mirrors cell division. Growth mirrors biology. So perhaps it is a birth story told in geometry, a silent music, a prayer without words. Maybe it belongs not to Egypt or Greece or India, but to geometry itself. Any civilization with a compass could discover it, like discovering a theorem. If so, why do some see tool and others see portal? Perhaps each era needs its own miracle. In times of overload, a pattern promising calm order becomes powerful. When someone calls it the blueprint of life, perhaps they are expressing a human wish to believe life is not random, to believe pain fits into a shape. If the universe had a code, why would it be visible in such an easily drawn pattern? If life had a blueprint, why would it hang on necklaces rather than under microscopes? Maybe the real mystery is not whether it holds secrets, but why we are compelled to search for them in intersecting circles. And maybe the true secret lies in the intersection itself, where two circles overlap and form something new. That new shape might be life. When you look at the flower of life, what do you see? Ancient design, mathematical model, meditation symbol, or a mirror reflecting your deepest need for order and meaning? If tomorrow you draw it yourself with a compass, starting from one small circle and expanding outward, are you certain what is blooming on the page is only geometry? Or is a larger question blooming in your mind? What is that question? And will you answer it with mathematics, with belief, or with silence?